Welcome back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines. I am going to take over today as the main host. Haha. My name is Jess, and I'm joined, as always, with Matt. Nope. Bye. Hold on, ready? All right.
Some other guy.
I was like, bye, Max.
I'm kicking you out. It's just the Jessica show now. Bye.
Max will be listening. All right. Sorry.
Nodding approvingly.
Yes, go on.
Indeed. Wow.
Oh.
You don't say. Oh, man.
Okay. Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines. I'm your host, Jess, and I'm joined by co-host Max.
Hello.
Our last episode, we talked about the creation of the nation state of Haiti. It's the first successful slave revolt in 1790s into the early 1800s. And quickly following that, in 1825, Haiti is burdened with this debt from France, lost wages, losing that colony. They are forced via gunboat to accept these terms, kind of sets them up for a rocky path ahead. And when we were doing our research, looking into the part that we wanted to get to with the rice and moving us into current day 20th century history, we stumbled upon a really interesting tidbit, if you will. And we kind of went down a rabbit hole, and we want to bring you down this rabbit hole with us. And it brought us into the debt itself and how the U.S. kind of got involved in this debt, because I had never heard of the U.S. owning any part of Haiti's debt. I thought it was always France, but not true. The U.S. does come to own a portion of it, and it leads to the U.S. occupation of Haiti, which I didn't know, I had no idea about.
When we were first reading about it, we were looking into actually just the rice portion. We weren't even going to look into the debt because we saw that the U.S. took it, but it was just banks buying debt, and we were like, okay, that's
And it
seems
was a little
normal, right?
confusing. Yeah.
Yeah,
A little
but it was just
confusing
like,
too, and yeah.
we don't want to get too far into the financial aspect of things, whatever. And then we were reading about the rice, and there was a throwaway sentence at the end of a paragraph that was just, this marks the first time the U.S. got involved in such a large way since the 1915
to 1934 U.S. occupation of Haiti.
Yeah.
We were like,
and then
wait,
and
what?
we were like, wait a minute. Occupation? What is that? And then we looked into it, and it led us down, like Jess said, this massive rabbit hole where it was just this history that I've never heard of. And I love history. I've always loved history, American history in particular, and I've never even heard of this.
But I think it is a classic Latin American history story where there is such fantastical portions of it that you're like, wait, what? How have I never heard of this? Gold is being stolen. It's craziness all around.
One of the biggest pieces of literature that we found on this that really, it gets a little bit more into detail than we're going to get, but it's a New York Times article called "The Ransom: Invade Haiti, Wall Street Urged, the U.S. Obliged." This was written not that long ago. It was published May 20th, 2022. So only like 2 years ago, right? And it was written by Salam Gabrekedan, Matapuzo, Catherine Porter, and Constant Mewi, who is their like New York Times correspondent in Paris, which is pretty cool. A lot of what we say today is going to be pulled from this article. We'll link it to the notes when I publish this article, so you can go and read it and even listen to it if you so desire. It's pretty cool. They had somebody read the article, and you can play it and listen to it while you're driving or whatever. But I'm going to read the opening paragraphs of this article real quick, and you can kind of see why we got so enthralled with this and wanted to dig deeper and do a whole article on this, right? Yep. Here goes. In the drowsy hours of a December afternoon, 8 American Marines strolled into the headquarters of Haiti's National Bank and walked out with $500,000 in gold packed in wooden boxes. They drove the loot by wagon to the shore, past American soldiers in civilian clothes who kept watch along the route. Once at the water, they loaded the boxes and sped to an awaiting gunboat. The gold was in the vault of a Wall Street bank within days. The operation took place in 1914, a precursor to the full-scale invasion of Haiti. American forces took over the country the following summer and ruled it with brute force for 19 years, one of the longest military occupations in American history. That right there is just wild.
I had no idea.
It's like a Wild West bank robbery, but U.S. Marines robbing an entire country. but they didn't technically rob it. They did, but the way it got here is just it's wild. So we're going to go back a little bit. This happened in 1914, and to kind of understand why the United States was okay with this, we have to go back to about the 1890s.
Par for the course again with Latin American history. Late 1800s, like Max said, 1890, the U.S. wanted access to a port in Haiti, but Haiti said no, thank you. The U.S. is looking to spread its influence more, push Europe out of what they can, the U.S. considers their backyard. And when Haiti says no, it doesn't really sit well
Yeah,
with the U.S. and it will lead to more gunboat diplomacy,
right.
as Max alluded to, right? 1915, we see Marines on Haiti shores, but starting in the 1890s, there's a little bit of discontent with Haiti turning down the U.S.'s proposal. They will go back in a literal gunship. It's the USS Philadelphia to look to take over parts of the Northwest. So, how would you say that in French?
I haven't even
Well, it's
gotten the
north.
directions yet.
It's north. It's Nord-Oest. Oeust.
Oh, so in
Ouest.
French, it probably sounds like
Yeah.
no.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty good. Ouest.
No, like yeah.
It's this region that's in French called Northwest, so Nord-Ouest. I bring that up because this is going to cause some discontent in the 1890s. There again, the U.S. is trying to like capture some of these key cities. This region, Nord-Ouest, if you look at today's conflict, where are the gangs the biggest issue? It's the same exact region. So I'm not saying that discontent starts in 1890, but it definitely continues, and this is still a region of contention today.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And to just go back just a little bit, we mentioned last episode that the U.S. really didn't want to even acknowledge Haiti's independence, largely because a large contingent of the United States were slave owners. But during the Civil War, when the southern states seceded, Abraham Lincoln was the first one to actually acknowledge Haiti's independence and their existence, and even sent some freedmen over there to establish a town, thinking it could be a place that they could go to after the war.
Oh, yeah, yeah. 1862 is when Lincoln, right. And when you say the
Yeah.
first one, you mean the first U.S. president, right?
Yes.
Not like internationally. Yeah. The
No,
first
yeah,
U.S.
first
president
U.S.
to
president.
recognize.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had been around, right? If you remember, like at least 60 years by that point ish.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in 1890s, but let's go. Do you want to kind of hit on the Roosevelt corollary? Because what I was thinking is 1890s, 1898 is the Spanish-American War, bringing us back down into this area, into the Caribbean. The U.S. acquires Cuba, they acquire Puerto Rico, Philippines, Guam, all of these other territories in 1903. And then shortly after that, the Roosevelt corollary is going to be brought about.
Right. So this is the Roosevelt corollary is really part of the Monroe Doctrine. It's kind of an add-on under Teddy Roosevelt, where and there's also a fun political cartoon I'm going to try and put up in the notes if I can figure out how. Going to try and throw that in there. What the Roosevelt corollary is, essentially the Monroe Doctrine was saying, how would you best summarize? European countries kind of stay out of Latin America?
Yeah, the Monroe Doctrine is almost like, let me draw an invisible line around the Western Hemisphere, and this is for the U.S.
Right.
And outside influences need not apply.
Exactly.
And
And the
then the
Roosevelt
Roosevelt
corollary
corollary
is, I would
is
say, very aptly named because it's coming from the speak softly, carry a big stick guy,
right.
where
He's in Havana, right, with the Rough Riders. He's the one like charging the hill. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Teddy.
And what this is it essentially says, stay out, but we have the right to use force to keep you out.
And just to go even farther, the U.S. is saying if you outside influence like Europe or whoever else decide that you want to do something in another Latin American country, not the U.S., another sovereign nation,
Yes.
we have given the right to us to use military force to kick you out of that nation.
Yes.
whether said nation wants you there or not, and we can do this without their
Approval.
like permission,
Yeah.
permission.
This is like this is basically the United States saying we're looking after American interests. That means we don't want you anywhere near here, and we will do what we have to get you out of there, regardless of what the other country thinks.
Right. This is exactly it. There is no discussion with other sovereign nation being discussed over. There's nothing happening with Argentina or Central American country X, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not
And
it.
this was their policy for a good, quarter of a century.
And I would just point out, 1904, it's the end of the Spanish American War. that this idea of imperialism with a growing physical boundary is still positive. This manifest destiny of
Yes.
moving us to other areas, coupled
I'm
with
glad.
like the white man's burden,
Yeah.
the
I'm glad you
poems.
said it.
That's kind of
Because I was gonna bring up like Manifest Destiny, that same thing. It's
yeah.
exactly that. Just when
Right.
people think of Manifest Destiny, they think of just going west, but it's
Right,
more
but
than
it
that.
does include it does include this international sphere. It will change after the Philippine War, right? How the U.S. views its thoughts on imperialism as a sense of physically owning more land and having
Hmm.
colonies,
Hmm.
whatever. That will change with the Philippine insurrection, but 1904, that's very much still in flavor, where the U.S. needs to be in certain parts of the world, and again, to quote the Kipling's poem, like to bring light to dark corners of the world, right? That is the
Right.
mentality still going on in this 1904 timeframe.
Right. So after that,
So,
after the way the U.S. kind of even gets involved is Haiti's going through kind of like this wild time, right?
yep.
Their national bank is national really in name only. It's
Yep.
controlled by its board in Paris, which was set up in
Hmm.
1880 by a French bank because the Haitians owed the French this massive debt, but they took out these even bigger loans from the French bank to pay off that debt. So
To
now
pay
they
the debt.
don't. Yeah, so now they don't even owe really the French government. They owe this French bank,
Hmm.
and this bank is just bleeding them dry. Essentially, they control
Yep.
Haiti's treasury. The Haitian government can't deposit or spend money without paying commissions to the bank. And
Yep.
eventually, Haitian authorities start accusing the bank of fraud, and they start jailing
Hmm.
some of their employees, right? Like,
And
because
so,
obviously.
yeah. When we're looking at the numbers, just for context, about 80% of Haiti's revenue is going towards these payments that you just mentioned.
80% for an entire country. Like, it's just going to a French bank. Like, it's
So,
insane that this was even a thing that was allowed to happen.
right. So again, you're thinking like what is not getting paid, right? There is no infrastructure development, right? Education
Yeah.
or anything. There's just not the financial
Um,
space to do any of that. Yeah.
they get 20% of their own profit,
I
of their
know.
own money they get to use on themselves. Which is just kept, it's like it keep things running at a bare minimum. When the
Yeah.
U.S. eventually arrived, there's no roads, there's no like electricity, like it's
Hmm.
the houses are ramshackle, like it's not great.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the
But
Haitians start to distrust the bank even more, right? And then investors of the French bank in France and Germany kind of scramble to recast it under the new European ownership. And obviously,
hmm.
like we just talked about with the Roosevelt corollary, the United States does not like that.
Right.
So the State Department calls their proposal a threat not only to the United States, but also to the welfare and independence of the Haitian people. Apparently, one top State Department official lashed out at the deal, saying it's so detrimental to American interests and so derogatory to the sovereignty of Haiti that it could not be permitted. You'll notice which one comes first in both of
Yeah.
those sentences.
Yeah. I
Uh,
know.
it's like, So the current Secretary of State at the time, whose name is Philander Knox, which is just a wild name, he invites a
Yeah.
few Wall Street banks to Washington, and he encourages them to invest in Haiti's national bank. Four banks,
What
including the National City Bank of New York. Well, was
what
that?
time period are you in? What year are
This is
you in?
19. So this is 1910,
Okay. Okay.
before the U.S. invasion. This is just how they're kind of starting to get involved.
Got it.
So this is 1910. Philander Knox invites the Wall Street banks to Washington, encourages them to invest. They do. Four banks, including the National City Bank of New York, which would eventually be Citibank, buy up a significant portion of the bank's shares. But right now, another slice went to a German bank, and the largest piece stays with Paris. So again,
Hmm.
no Haitians have a controlling stake in the bank. The National Bank of Haiti is, again, run by foreigners.
And now Haiti's debt is now making multiple countries money.
Yes, it's
So
going
nuts.
still to France, some to Germany, and the US is now getting a slice of the pie as well.
Okay.
And unshockingly to everybody, the bank continues to do what it had done. It charges the government for every deposit and expense, making big profits for themselves. And
Hmm.
then Haitians are like, what the heck? And this leads us to Roger Leslie Farnham and what we'll talk about, what eventually becomes known as the Farnham Plan. Roger Farnham was a journalist who was eventually poached as a lobbyist for the National City Bank of New York. He spent a lot of his time in Haiti and trying to drive the narrative there.
It's dubbed the Farnham Plan because he is coming up with a plan on how to really take over Haiti's finances. He's able to convince a lot of these investors that they'll get about 20% return on their investment. However, at first, they're not seeing any numbers like that. And so instead of, admitting defeat, he kind of doubles down and looks for a way to get more money out of what's going on with Haiti and its debt.
At this point, Americans were still minority stakeholders in the National Bank, but Farnham would tell Congress that France is far too consumed by World War I to run it. So active management has been from New York. Now, I know you were saying it wasn't just World War I. There was more that France was dealing with as well.
Right. So World War I is going to start 1914 in Europe, but prior to that, France and Germany from 1905 to 1911 are engaged in what is known as the Moroccan crisis. So there is, another military conflict that is happening over in Europe and, Northern Africa. So France is busy with that, and then they have a bit of a reprieve and then roll into World War I.
Right. So France is obviously busy with that. And Farnham notices this. And he goes to the State Department because he's buddy with them, builds a big relationship with the people in charge there. And the State Department drafts a convention based on Farnham's plan and sent him to help deliver it. And he basically threatens William Jennings Bryan, he was the Secretary of State at the time. Yeah. And he says basically all American businesses would leave Haiti unless the United States government intervened to protect their interests. And you pointed out that this is important because America had become Haiti's biggest trade partner, or even overcoming France for that title.
They elbowed France out of the way. And right, again, leading into what we were talking about earlier about America working to push out European influence in Latin America.
Right. This all ties together because Farnham uses all of these things. He's like, we need to protect American interests. There's chaos and anarchy pointing to the 5 presidents within 3 years.
Yeah, and they're assassinated, right? There's coups, assassinations in Haiti. Yeah. This is all in Haiti. Yeah.
Yep. So he's like, we need to protect interests because it's wild down there. There's a growing German presence, they say, which there are Germans in Haiti. So, and at the time, they're like, okay, yep, no, this is part of the Roosevelt corollary. We're going to go down there. We're going to handle it. But in July of 1915, the 5th of the presidents in 3 years is drug out of the French consulate, killed by an angry mob, and the United States invades the same day. The plan was written up in 1914 by the U.S. Navy, which was the same year that the Marines had walked in and stolen the gold, or quote-unquote taken the gold, from the Haitian National Bank and escorted it back to Wall Street.
They did that with the excuse was, we need to hold on to this because there's so much instability. So
right, we're protecting
so technically it's kind of ours, yeah, so we can protect it, and there's no better place for us to protect it than in New York.
And obviously, Haitians were not happy about that. Haitian officials were really pissed about it and started, yelling at the U.S. And historians would look back at this, the first major intervention of the United States in Haiti's affairs. And a year later, the president is killed by an angry mob. United States invades the same day.
That's right. July of 1915, the U.S., on the day that this president is killed, is invading that same day.
Yep. It's they were just waiting for it. And this was enough for them, or egged on by Wall Street and Farnham for a number of reasons that we previously talked about. So one of the first things the Americans do when they invade is to install a friendly government to themselves. And by that fall, Haiti signs a treaty giving the U.S. full financial control. So no more France, no more Germany. They have the gold. They have legal control of Haiti's finances. They appoint American officials they call advisors, but they have a lot more power than advisors, and they oversee Haiti's revenue collection and approve, deny everything related to its expenses. It used to have to go through the French bank. Now it all goes through these American advisors, quote unquote.
And Haiti as a country has to pay these advisors 5% of its national revenue.
Yeah, they get a salary. The one that we'll talk about is John A. McElhaney, and he is the heir to the Tabasco fortune.
The Tabasco heir is one of the advisors getting paid 5% of Haiti's
a big salary
revenue.
Yeah, and he's not even in Haiti. He's staying on his pineapple plantation in Louisiana.
That's so crazy.
One of the things that we'll just mention, but when we talk about so much racism at the time. Remember, the Haiti is an all-black country, essentially. And these people coming in are just insanely racist. It's bad.
Yeah, so McKinley, there's a quote from McKinley that says, "I couldn't stop staring at one of these Haitian government officials because I was thinking about I'm quoting, not me. It says McKinley is saying all I could think about was how much money that person would have fetched at auction. And he's talking
It's
about a
just
Haitian
like,
government. First off, he says talking about a human, and then second, he's
yeah,
talking about a Haitian government official.
yes. And this is a
Yeah,
guy who's the
that's an advisor. That's
in
somebody that's supposed to
charge
be
of
advising.
like all the country's money. One of the guys in charge of
Hmm.
all of that, which is just mind blowing.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it doesn't get better
No.
from there. The US, they start, like you were saying, it's kind of the playbook for Latin American countries. They go in, they start working on infrastructure, they start building roads from like the quote unquote mountainous interior to the coast. But the way they do this is not great. They resurrect this Haitian law from the 19th century called corvée, and it's basically indentured labor. Haitians would work a couple days out of the year on the infrastructure, public works projects for a tax write-off, essentially. And what the United States was doing was just taking people, moving them far away from their homes, and just forcing them to work for free.
Right, not a new system. Unfortunately, dates all the way back to conquistador days in various parts of Latin America, where there would be labor to pay off a debt, and usually under very harsh conditions. But same thing, right? You'd move to wherever that labor was needed, right, for the railroads or whatever. A lot of times
Yeah,
it's like mining. You'd work, in some cases, you work for an entire year, and then you'd go back home, and then you're not called on again for a couple of years. So not a
right.
new system. The U.S. using it is kind of new in this region of the world, and it's not great overall. Like, right, it's not good to
No,
read about, not good to remember, but fortunately a thing that is happening and good to be
right.
thinking about, because we've talked about, right, the U.S. and Americans kind of have short-term memories. Some areas of the world really hold on to things for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And we can
And
kind of see why some people feel certain ways about other groups of people.
Absolutely. And speaking of memories, this is the
Hmm.
US is coming in and essentially making them work for free, right? And
Yep.
Haitians, for very obvious reasons, see this as a return
Hmm.
of slavery, which they were a
Hmm.
country born out of a slave revolt. So this is not,
Hmm.
they don't look kindly upon this, right?
Right, right,
Now,
right.
some Haitians escape from Corvée and
Hmm.
they're armed, they flee to the mountains, and they begin this insurgency against American forces. They're called Cacos,
Hmm.
and it's they fight back, but it's not like they're fighting U.S. Marines. It doesn't work out really well for them. Eventually, the leader is captured and
Hmm.
executed, and the U.S. distributes photos of him tied to a door. It says
Yeah.
evoking a crucifixion,
Yep.
and the official numbers from leaked military documents show 3,250 Haitians were killed.
16 Marines on the other side.
Yeah, 16 Marines to the 3,250. What's wild, too, is that Congress investigated in 1921, and the Marines lowered the number, saying that only 2,250 Haitians had been killed. And it's like,
Which was,
what?
so then that was okay, but
Yeah, like,
but
it's still 2,250 people you're killing for escaping labor.
yeah.
And during that point, once people started fleeing the corvée, the Americans started binding them together with rope, and like it was
Hmm.
very, if not slavery adjacent, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It was not good. So they had good reason to fight. Antoine Bervin, he was a Haitian journalist and diplomat, wrote in 1936 that it was a strict military regime, the triumph
Yeah.
of the wolf.
Pretty powerful quote.
Especially as Americans, like learning history, it's, history's written by the victors, right? It's like, yeah, we did so
Hmm.
good, and that's so great. Hearing it from the other side is always like, oh, makes you think a little bit.
Well, in this case, we didn't hear about it at all.
Exactly, until now. So
Yeah.
hopefully our listeners are learning and are as intrigued as we were.
Yeah, it's crazy. The
Go
military
ahead.
occupation is the one part of it, right? Military occupation, kind of this puppet government. So that's one side of this.
Yes.
Economically, which is just, again, another insane story, right? We talked about some of that. I just think it's so insane that 5% is going to these advisors, and then America collected debt payments to National City Bank would comprise of 25% of Haiti's revenue. And then these debt payments would be the largest gains in the 1920s in the US. So National City Bank is the one that makes the most money in the 1920s, and most of that money is made off of Haiti's debt revenue.
Right. For doing nothing, just buying it and stealing their gold.
Correct.
Citibank is making all this money on the back of a United States Marine invasion.
Correct.
It's
Well,
it's
and
wild.
then yeah, and an invasion that they went to Congress to have happen,
Orchestrate.
right? Like they are the ones that were, yeah, orchestrating is that there's that easy word that I keep forgetting. Right. The bank owners, right, are the ones that are going to Congress and orchestrating this military occupation, which
Yes,
is
because they saw dollar
again,
signs.
unfortunately, again, not its own story, right? It's not a story unheard of in Latin America, and that'll be another thing that we talk about down the road. But unfortunately, private businesses running to the government and being like, "Hey, I need help," and then the government responding and going into
Okay.
a Latin American country. This is not the only time that it happens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This occupation will be wrapped up under what will later be called the Banana Wars, and we'll get into that in another episode. But still, again, not an.
Those episodes will be bananas. So looking
Anywho.
at this, one of the crazier things that happened is in 1917. So even
Mhm.
before this uprising, the Marines basically march into Haiti's National Assembly and
Mhm.
force it to disband.
Yep.
And in doing so, they make them essentially enact a new constitution, which you and I
Written by.
saw and thought was crazy. Was Franklin
Yeah.
Delano Roosevelt would later brag at a campaign rally that he himself had written.
Yeah.
Like, the main thing in this constitution, this new constitution, allows foreigners to own land in Haiti.
Mhm.
Haitians, understandably, looking back at their history, did not want foreigners to own land in their country.
Right.
It makes sense. This would lead to American companies coming in and buying up tons of land to just profit off of the wealthy plantations down there. One
Yep.
being the Haitian American Sugar Company.
Yep.
And they actually boasted to their investors that they paid only 20 cents for a day's worth of labor in Haiti compared to $1.75 in Cuba. 10 cents for women and children, which,
Oh,
like,
again, right? Minority
yes.
landowner for this Haitian American Sugar Company, majority of Haitians working the land.
Mm-hmm.
In buying all of this land too, there is going to be a migration of people. So whoever was on this land is now displaced, moving somewhere else, and we're going to see, the ripple effects of foreign land ownership.
Historians say, like, this is one of the biggest legacies of the
Mhm.
U.S. invasion and occupation was just the mass migration of Haitians to other countries throughout the Americas.
Yep.
And
And with
then,
anywhere, when you see a mass migration, whether it's right, we're talking about the early 1920s with the Haitian American Sugar Company and then foreign land investment. But even today, when we're looking at mass migration, if it's out of people in Ukraine or when we saw people moving out of Yemen and Syria, puts a massive strain on the country that they are going to, which
yeah,
has effects on the entire region. So it's
yeah,
not like, oh, and then people moved. It's like, and then people moved, and then a lot of other things were stressed. The system
right,
was
right.
stressed. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing. Like, you see when all of, like, the Syrians and whatnot, when the Middle East were leaving because the country was just at the civil war for like forever.
Yep.
There was the immigration in the EU that was just, it was the story nonstop for years because it's just
Yep.
there's no housing for them, or
Hmm.
they're causing
Food.
there's crime because they need to eat and there's not enough, and like
Mhm.
there's all of these issues, and that's happening throughout
Yeah.
the Americas at this point.
Yeah, right. So they're moving to areas that don't have the infrastructure to really support a mass movement of people into it. But that's
Yeah, it's a
another
whole nother
rabbit
topic.
hole, but just something to think about.
So after this, by
Hmm.
1920, National City Bank of New York buy out all of the shares of the National Bank for $1.4 million. So they are
Yep.
the only ones Haiti debt payments are going to now. They
Yep.
replace French as the dominant financial power in Haiti, and that's essentially it for France. Like, they're done. It's
You're done. Yep.
all New York now.
Yep.
And in this time period from the 1917 to 1922, the United States is pushing this loan from New York to settle past debts. Essentially the same thing the French bank did.
Yep.
Take out this loan and you can pay back France. Now New York is like, take out this loan and you can pay back the other
We're gonna
bank.
pay the bank back with its own money from that bank, and then pay us more money for the money that you just got out of the bank.
Exactly. And this they were pushing this for 5 years, but Haitians were like, no, we've been there, we've done that, we don't want it. We don't want you to be here for any second longer than you have to be. We
Hmm.
want to wipe our hands, be done with you. But
Yeah.
in 1922, the U.S. basically props up this guy, Luis Borno, and he is a
Mussolini
fascist
follower, right?
wannabe. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is a fan
Hmm.
of a self-proclaimed fan of Mussolini. He was
Yeah.
all about the United States invasion. He wrote that the invasion came to us when we were on the brink of a bloody chasm and saved us. And
Mhm.
weeks after he took offer, he greenlights that loan from New York. So
Yeah.
it's this massive loan that just gets Citibank nearly all of Haiti's foreign debt. So it accumulates all of it.
And makes Citibank a ton of money.
Yeah, a ton of money. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just a repeat of what happened in the 19th century. Too indebted to invest in its own people. Borno, the fascist guy, even said to national city banks like bigwigs in New York, Haiti's debt was getting paid off faster than the United States' own debt.
Yeah.
It's just so things are not great. Haitians don't love it. They're fighting against this occupation, and then the stock market crash in 1929.
Which we won't get into, but maybe caused by Citibank.
Yeah.
You know.
The National City Bank of New York also had a big role to play in that. We're not going to talk about that right now.
No.
Maybe later if we can figure out a way it pertains to food, which I guess it does. But you know what? That'll be fun to dig into later. It really affects Haiti because prices of like their foodstuffs start to fall. Like coffee prices, you said rice.
The exports, the price of exports drops, and again, Haiti is an exporting country, and rice, they're exporting rice. Coffee is a huge export for Haiti, and all those prices are dropping very fast. So the crop is almost more money to grow than it is to sell.
Yeah, and things are just really bad. There start to be protests. Students start protesting and demonstrating because their scholarships are being taken away. Customs employees in the capital storm their workplace. In the city of Lekay, more than 1,000 farmers, reading straight from the article here, railed against their threadbare living conditions. A detachment of 20 Marines confronted the crowd and killed at least a dozen people. It became known as the Lekay Massacre. And then, faced with international outcry, United States began to contemplate its withdrawal. I say contemplate because it took almost 5 more years until August 1934 for the last American troops to leave Haiti. But, and there's a big but, the U.S. retained financial control for 13 more years until Haiti paid off the last of its debts to Wall Street. 1947, the last debt payments. And this is 122 years after the French gunboats arrived and forced them to start paying for their lost revenue.
And that's
It's insane. Like I can't even get over it. Again, right from the article here, some historians say the original payments demanded by France to punish Haiti for its independence inflicted a deeper scar on the nation's development. Others say the long history of self-enrichment by Haiti's leader is the principal cause. But many say, taken together, more than 130 years of sending a large share of Haiti's income overseas took an indelible toll, sapping its ability to build a nation since its infancy. And that's just, to me, that's like obvious.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they were not given the opportunity ever to invest their money into their own country.
It's a shame.
It really is. And we see today, like how all of that has really taken its toll on the country.
Yeah, for sure.
That's stuff that we'll get into in the next part of this episode. We're going to talk about the 50s up to modern day and how these gangs started getting formed. We'll finally talk about barbecue.
Yep, that's right. And more about rice.
Yeah, but this is where we'll really bring into the the long history of self-enrichment by Haiti's leaders. And I guess you could include Borno here, but after the 50s, after the U.S. occupation to modern day, there is a long history of this self-enrichment. And I mean, I can't say I'm really surprised because it's like,
yeah, sure, of course.
You're giving this money to foreign countries for so long, 122 years after your infancy, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, never mind. Now you have all that money. What do you expect a new president to be like? I better do what's right and put it back into the country and these public works and this education and blah, 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 blah.
Well, I mean, that's what we would hope for, right? Like when we're looking at it through our lens, that's what we hope for. But like we see in current day things, when there is a power vacuum, right, this chaos ensues. And then who is the one that like kind of rises to the top? It's probably the one that's got the most, I don't know how to say it, but it's like, the one that's the craftiest, the one that, the one that's the swindiest. Windy.
Yeah, the swindiest one, of course. It's I get what you're saying though. Like it's like a political game, and so whoever is the swindiest,
crafty,
yeah,
the swindiest, swifty. No, that's not right.
What is the word? What are we trying to think of here?
You know what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, the slyest,
shystiest.
Shadiest?
Yeah, somewhere in that realm of adjectives.
Right.
That's who's gonna like emerge right from the top.
And then they do what they can because they aren't these honest and trustworthy politicians. They do what they can to
Well, and then it's,
elongate their position and back it up and ensure it's going
exactly,
to keep going. And that's where you start
exactly.
seeing
That,
these
yep,
gangs formed and all this kind of
yep,
stuff.
yep, right. The grab for power, and then when that is what is the focus, right? The grab for power and how you do that and how you secure that. What is being ignored? What is being left to the side that run the society, right? That run the
Yeah.
country,
Yep.
and how does that affect everybody else from the, basically the top down? Yeah, no,
Yeah.
right.
And then
It's important. Yeah,
there's so much more I would like to talk about, but I think
yeah.
we've basically covered up the US occupation in this episode. We've
And
hit the
then,
high notes, right? Like
yeah,
there's so much more that you can
yeah.
look into and read, and like I said, I will post this article in the
Hmm.
notes just so anybody who wants to read it can read it or listen to it. It's wild. And we left out some of the names and stuff just because we didn't want to go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but
Yeah,
in general, I think we hit the big points here and talked about how this relatively unknown occupation, this unknown part of American history, really
yeah.
played a huge part in another country's history, can be seen as largely responsible for what we're seeing today.
Right. Yeah, it's going to kind of set this foundation or continue the shaky foundation that Haiti is formed on. And we can see a lot of things, right? We were just talking about the food and the exports and how that's affecting economy, and that will continue. And then the relationship with the U.S. and Haiti, and that will come back, right? Because the U.S. military will go back to Haiti in the 1990s. So how does that work into this relationship, And then the government, right? The political side of that, how foreign influence really set off this weird movement of people, like this migration, and then like a weird precedence, and then this grab for power within Haiti and like Haitian leaders.
Yeah, I mean it's all connected. You can
Yeah,
just follow it through from Haiti's
right,
birth to present day and be like, okay, now I get it.
right.
Because like you see what
And
you
yeah,
go
this
ahead.
present day problem has really long roots, really, really deep roots is what we're trying to get at, right?
Yes. And I think this helps understand it. We talked about the massive debt to the French. We talked about how the US
Mm-hmm.
got it and how they got involved and messed with things in the country. And
Mm-hmm.
then, next episode, part 3 of this episode, we'll kind of build off of that and get to present day. And then we want to do a fourth kind of wrap up episode where we really just focus on the foodstuffs like the coffee, the rice, the sugar, and talk about how that played an important role in Haiti's history and kind of what went wrong. And so we hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed it. It was extremely fascinating for us to just dig into and study a little bit. And I mean, we even sat down to like record one day and we just got completely sidetracked by digging in even further and
Yeah.
being like, "Whoa, this is so crazy! Can you believe? Look, read this, look at this."
Yeah,
And
I
it's
know.
just, I mean, it's really fun. So I really, really hope you enjoy it. I want to thank everybody again for listening. This episode is up today, which is Monday, and next Monday we'll be taking a break from this series. We're going to be having a fun episode on how PepsiCo ended up with the 5th largest navy in the world at one point,
Yeah.
and the week after that, we'll continue with the Haiti series. Reminder that you can follow us on Instagram at Farms and Frontlines, on Threads, same name. And you can email us at farmsandfrontlines@gmail.com. If you have any questions, want to give any suggestions on topics you'd love to hear about, just tell us we're doing a good job. We'd love that. Um,
Send us a sticker. Send us a
yeah,
star
send us
sticker.
a sticker.
Great.
Really, really love it. If you haven't, be sure to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and just help us grow. And if you're enjoying what we're putting out here,
Yeah, great. Thanks again.